Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. Today, I interview Alexandra Covucci, an international leadership and success coach, on expansion. We talk about why expansion is so important to our soul's journey and how expansion can contribute to our overall love and happiness. We talk about power, realizing who you're giving your power to and why it is so important that we reclaim our power back. We talk about fear versus ego. We talk about intuition, relationships, breakups, travel, past trauma, and the conversation led into so many different little topics, but it was really fun and super interesting and powerful, and I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. I linked Alexandra's Facebook and Instagram so you can get in touch with her in the show notes, and also her website if you guys want to check out her work, and you guys know where to contact me on Instagram at arel.hug.love. I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, Alexandra. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah. Where are you right now?
I am currently in the Boston area. I've been going back and forth from Boston to San Diego. And so you caught me in the Boston area right now.
In the Boston area.
East Coast.
Are you based from both, or are you actually based in Boston then?
So I was based in Boston for a really long time. I was actually, my former relationship, which ended kind of recently, was a military relationship. And so we did a little bit of moving. And then we were based in Boston, and that's also where we ended our relationship. And so now I just kind of find myself with the opportunity to float a little bit. And so I'm kind of taking advantage of it and going back and forth. So not really based anywhere, and kind of landing in a few places.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm like that with New Zealand and Canada. I'm kind of like,
yeah, you've been bouncing around as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. But mine are a lot further apart. So
Right.
a lot harder. But awesome. First question of the day is, what elevates your soul?
What elevates my soul? So I think that this question can be answered both in like a really, really large way, right? And I'll answer the large, I'll give you the large zoomed out answer, and then the small kind of intricate answer.
Cool.
What elevates my soul is, the large answer is people. I have a fascination with human beings, and more specifically speaking, the psychology of human beings, like how we operate, why we operate the way we do, how that functions in society, how that functions in our personal lives, how that functions in relationships, how that functions in our creations, and like who we are and how we show up. I geek out. I get so nerdy about human psychology and just really understanding like what the hell is going on with all of us, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that that's a zoomed out perspective of that answer. And then what elevates my soul is also, like being in a moment of being present with my dog, or, noticing the light in the morning, or, like feeling the weather and recognizing it. So I think I'm often trying to find things that elevate my soul, but on a grandiose level, I would say just really understanding human beings, and really kind of paying attention to like what we're doing here, and why we're doing it, and how we're doing it, and what are we doing it for, and all those kind of big existential questions that I'll probably never be able to answer. But it definitely elevates me for sure.
Maybe one day.
One day.
I can see you writing a book one day.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Sure. I love watching your Insta stories. You're always like picking out little situations or scenarios in life, and then like analyzing them and investigating them. But you come up with so much like knowledge and the beliefs or whatever around it, like the lessons you learn from it, and you have such a good way of explaining it. So
thank you. I always say if I wasn't in the coaching space, I would probably be a detective, because the way that my brain works is very like observing a lot and noticing a lot, and why is this happening? Why is that happening? What does that connect to? So I'd either be a really killer detective or a killer coach.
you love to pick things apart for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely.
Can you tell us a bit about you and your story in relation to expansion?
Yeah, so I would say that the first time that I really understood what expansion was, I'm still kind of figuring out what expansion is, right? Like after all these years and all these iterations, I think we're always kind of figuring out what the hell anything really means, right? But I won't get all meta on it. I think my first experience with expansion was really, I'm going to take you all the way back to when I was 21. And I remember having this moment. I was at university and everybody was getting jobs and everybody was filling out their resume. And I was totally resistant to all of it, right? I was like, I don't want to go to the career center. I don't want to fill out a resume. I don't want to create a resume. I don't want to look for a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, I can totally.
All of that sounds, yeah, like it like felt like, it was suffocating my soul. And all my friends were like, Alex, you got to go to the career center. Like, we're almost graduating. And I remember walking from campus to my apartment, and I was about halfway there, and I just stopped and I looked up at the sky. And it was just like this brief moment. And I was like, I'm going to buy a one-way ticket to South America and just see what happens.
Wow.
And I did. That kind of like sealed the deal. I made that decision in one fell swoop. And soon after that, I bought a one-way ticket down to Santiago, Chile. And I lived there for a year and a half. And what I found in that was like my first decision for expansion, right? Like the first decision where I went off the path that I was given, where I decided to make something else happen. And it was probably the hardest year and a half of my life. It was not like a fun adventure. It was like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. But what I recognized in that experience of expansion was, number one, wherever I go, there I am, right? Like whatever I wanted to run away from came with me. I couldn't escape anything. I couldn't escape myself. And also I started to recognize that I can make life look different than what I thought it had to look like. And so that was probably like the first experience of expansion that I really remember having, choosing something so random, a one-way ticket to South America. I didn't have any job down there. I didn't have any friends down there. I didn't have an apartment. Wow. I didn't have anything. I didn't know anything. I didn't have anything.
What made you choose the exact location you flew to?
I picked it. I just picked it. I knew that there were a few things going on politically in certain countries that I didn't want to be a part of, like Venezuela and Colombia. I knew that there were certain areas that I didn't want to be involved with politically.
Yeah.
Just for safety reasons. And so it was kind of like between that and Argentina. And I just randomly picked it. I just kind of like boiled it down and picked it, and nice. I just like stuck to my decision, and I just made it happen.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was tough. It was a really, really tough decision, but I think it grew me so much as a person, and it showed me that I'm really in a lot more control than I think.
For sure. Yeah. At such a young age too, right? It's so good.
Yeah. It was intense for sure.
Did you make any friends there when you were out there?
I did. Yeah. So by the time I left, I had like a whole community of friends. I had a full-time job. I had a side hustle as an English teacher. I had moved 3 different apartments. And then I had traveled South America. I'd backpacked for a while. So I created something out of nothing.
Wow. Do you still go back now?
I don't. I haven't been back since the day that I left. And it was, as I mentioned before, it was a really, really hard experience. And some of that stuff, like I remember driving away in the cab on the way to the airport. And behind me was my friend, who she didn't get in the cab with me. She was seeing me off. and a guy, my doorman, who had stalked me, and she had just called the police on him because he showed up at 3 a.m. to, because he knew I was leaving, and we'd had issues with him and the police. And so I remember driving away, and I was like, I don't ever want to come back here again.
Wow.
At this point, I'd probably go back, but at such a young age, and being so, it like threw me into the gauntlet. I didn't expect any of what happened, getting stalked and all of that stuff. And so I haven't made it back now.
Wow, that's crazy. That was, I have had that feeling before with certain places of the world, and with one place in particular. And I did end up going back because I kind of had to. But
what was it like to go back? What was that experience like for you?
Well, it wasn't so much like a place on the other side of the world. It was a town, it was a city that I lived in, and I kind of moved to another city. And then going back, I had a lot of PTSD. So I'd get like certain streets and like certain buildings, I guess, like the exact location, certain places, I'd get like anxiety attacks and things like that. And I just needed to avoid those locations, and I could kind of go on the outskirts of it, but a lot of PTSD. And then I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I never, I just want to avoid this area. And then about a year later, or a year and a half later, it took a while. And then I remember going back without even really thinking of it and being like, oh wow, I'm not feeling anxious, and I can see this whole town and this city from a total different perspective and a total different light. Whereas like in the past, I was like, oh, this dark city, and all this, violence and horrible things are happening in this city. And then all of a sudden now I can like look at it and just be like, oh, it's like a cute little city, and shit happens like any city, and there's good and there's bad. But I remember having that like of just a fear of going back, like having a shitty experience. But it does grow you. It grows you hugely.
It does. And like kind of as you pointed out, when we change, right? Like when we change our identities, or when we grow, we often relate to things in a different way. Like going back for you is like, oh, I'm a different person now, So that's super interesting.
Yeah, I was a different person, and I healed with trauma that happened to me there. Because I feel like a lot of it wasn't, it was trauma in me that I hadn't healed yet, and I hadn't really looked at. And I was wanting to avoid the trauma and the pain within me, and that was making me want to avoid the whole area in general. So
totally.
Yeah. And we do that with people, I think, as well. It's not just places. We definitely do that with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we find that wherever we go, there we are,
Exactly.
Until we heal it, until we look at it within us, it can have the potential to haunt us. Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's so powerful once you can heal, and then you have that perspective of, wow, I used to be, my feelings towards this, or I used to not be capable of doing this or seeing this person or going somewhere. And then overcoming that is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's like a reclamation, right? It's like we get to reclaim part of ourselves through the healing process, because when any kind of trauma happens, we can't help but give a part of ourselves away, right? Like when we are victimized, however we process that, we can't help but give a part of ourselves away. Maybe we're scared to go back to that place, right? We give power to that place. And so the healing process is also like such a powerful process of reclaiming ourselves from the places that we let hold our power. I think that's powerful.
Talking about reclaiming power and things like that, I want to shift the conversation onto the word power now. And can you share with us why it's so important that we can reclaim our own power back? Like realizing who and what we're giving our power to, and why it's important to get that power back.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to get that power back, because until we do, we're living our lives on some level for other people, right? Like we're living our lives to avoid something, or we're living our lives to fit in to society, or we're living our lives based on the rules of other people. When we reclaim our power, we start living our lives based on our own rules. We start living our lives based off of our own autonomy, our own desires, our own choices, our own individuality. And that includes who we decide to spend time with. That includes what we decide to create in the world. That includes what job we decide to have. But it's not until we really reclaim ourselves from all the places we give ourselves away to that we can utilize our power for the things we want to create, right?
And I feel like so many of us are unconsciously, though, giving our power to other people and things that we're unaware of. And that's what I kind of want to shine light on today, is making people aware of what they're giving their power to. You know, is it
Totally.
the media, society, their parents, their friends? You know, like how have they been conditioned to live a certain way or have certain core beliefs on
Mm-hmm.
life, or how their relationship should be life or like, or what love is, or what career they choose, or anything like that.
Yeah, I've found in my work with women that one of the biggest indicators of something else holding our power is when we don't do something we want to do because of a fear we have, right? So typically it's hard to know when something's owning our power, when something's holding our power, when we're giving our power away to something, because a lot of the time it feels normal, right? Like it feels normal to be raised to worry about what everybody thinks of us, right? It feels normal to just build a life we think we should have. And so it's sometimes hard to recognize where am I giving my power away? But one of the biggest indicators is when there's a big desire attached to a really big fear and fear wins, that's often where we're giving our power away. So a couple of examples. I really want to start my own business, but I feel like I shouldn't do that at this age. Like it wouldn't be a smart thing, right? I really don't want to be friends with this person anymore, but I don't want her to be mad at me,
Yeah.
right? It's like when we have a desire and then we let a fear dictate our actual action, that's where we give our power away.
Right.
Right? So it's taking the control from us and putting it into what this person thinks, what society says, what our parents say, what the belief that we used to have when we were fat says, right? Like whatever it is, whatever it happens to be for you.
Yeah.
I really want to wear a bikini to the beach, but a girl my size shouldn't wear a bikini to the beach, right? Like when we really want something and then fear comes in and we let that win, that's often where we give our power away.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so that's like a really good for anybody questioning, like, how do I know if I'm giving my power away? Just like, my parents are going to be mad if I do this, right? It's really when we have this fight between like, this is my desire and this is my fear, a healthy desire, not like, oh, I have the desire to like murder people, right? But like a healthy desire. This is my desire, but I'm letting something else dictate my decision.
Right. And why is that so important that we take that power back?
I believe it's important so that we actually live before we die. I mean, like it's kind of a extreme thought, but I often look at how often we allow other people and things to dictate the way we live our lives, right?
Yeah.
And I often look at, I look at my parents sometimes, and I think to myself, there's so many things that they wanted to do that they didn't do because society wouldn't have thought it was appropriate, or because they should be responsible, or because um, that's not what parents do. Parents can't just pick up and travel and blah 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 blah, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've seen as they get older, like, I can't help but notice that they're running out of time, as we all are, right? If we live to our old age, right? Obviously disasters happen.
Yeah.
But one thing that's true for all of us is we're running out of time. Whether that happens tomorrow or in 80 years, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
And so I believe, for me personally, my own value is that it's important that we reclaim our power so that we actually experience a life before we don't have it to experience anymore.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
So true. I'd love to
Yeah.
like, I don't know, find an example and like uh give a good example of how some people just wouldn't realize that they're being so like their thoughts and their actions are so bombarded by other things, and that they're not reclaiming their own power, but they're not realizing it. And like that's what I want this podcast episode to be. So I hope anyone listening
Yeah.
to it might be understanding it. I also want to ask, why is expansion, overall expansion, important to us? And does expansion contribute to our overall love and our overall happiness?
Yeah. So in response to the first part, I can offer a personal example if you'd like of like how we don't know if our power is given away, or like these little societal examples. I can offer one for you. And then why expansion is why it's important,
Yeah.
you said?
Yeah, why it's important. And for me, important means, does it contribute to our overall happiness and our love as humanity?
Yeah. So I'll share with you a concept that helped me really, really harness my experience of expansion. And it wasn't until last year, actually, when I decided to end my engagement to my partner of 7 years. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we created this idea of the house in the woods, right? We all live in a house. It's a house of what we're supposed to do, or whatever our life looks like now, right? We live in a house. And there are some people that are fine with the house. They know what to expect. It's 4 walls. They don't need to build an addition. It's fine. They're going to come home every day, do the same thing. That's fine. That's the house. Yeah. But then I believe that there are woods people meant to run in the woods, right? Meant to be free, meant to go wild, meant to build a cabin and then maybe move on to the next place, and then maybe sleep under the stars, right? Metaphorically, of course, or in reality. And I believe expansion is the choice to walk out the back door, onto the porch, go down into the dirt, and run in the woods. And what that signifies for me is leaving the bounds of all the rules that have been created for us, and running in the woods, right? And I believe when we run in the woods, when we expand, kind of expansion, if you will,
yeah,
it can't help but add to the way that we love, the way that we show up, the way that we build resilience, the way that we experience life, right? Because if you just do the same thing in the house all the time, and some people choose this, and that's an okay choice too, right? Yeah. Like, it's neither is right or wrong. Choosing not to expand is not wrong. But for those of us who need it, who like want it, crave it, need to feel it, when we don't, it affects the way we show up to the world. It affects the way that we love. It affects the way that we serve. It affects the way that we relate to people. Because if we dim ourselves, we're going to dim our connection with everything.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we affect our relationship with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with other people.
Right. And so expansion is really, if you break the word down, it's like, am I going to expand out of what I currently am experiencing? Am I gonna be bigger than this house that I've lived in? Am I going to be bigger than this box that I've put myself in? And it's uncomfortable to stretch that much. It's not the easy choice, for sure.
Yeah.
But I believe that there are a lot of people for whom making the more difficult choice to expand feels easier on their soul than contracting into like a house they don't want to live in anymore.
Yeah. And a lot of that expansion is facing our fears.
Absolutely.
And what are some examples that you could give of people who are wanting to expand, or people who just feel like they're kind of stuck in a rut, or they're living life as a routine that's just continuously happening, and the same thing keeps happening, and they keep running into the same problem, or they keep going to the same gym and keep doing the same job, and life is kind of getting repetitive and boring, and they want this variety in their life and they want to grow and expand, but they're not sure how.
Yeah, the big how is the question, right?
Yeah.
So how to expand? I would say, number one, honor your dissatisfaction, right? Like honor the questions that come up, honor the dissatisfaction. I can give a personal example that might relate to a lot of other people's examples.
Yes, please.
So about a year and a few months ago, I was set to be married. I was 20 days before my ceremony, and then we were going to have a wedding a year later. And I had this, I was at an intensive neurotransformation coach training. So I was being trained in neurotransformation. And I had this I had a process done on me, and I had like this stuff come up, and it was like, I don't know if I want to be a mom. I don't know if I want to be a wife. I don't know if I want to be her wife, right? I don't know if I want to be a military wife.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it was like a tiny little inkling. It was like a tiny little question, right? And I recognized the questions because they'd come up before, but I didn't listen to them, right?
Yeah.
But they were getting louder. And, I was getting closer to the ceremony and the wedding, and they were getting louder. And I started to recognize, like, I wasn't raised to question if I want children or not. I wasn't raised to question if this relationship is the right thing 20 days before the ceremony, right? Like all of that went against the grain, all of it, right? Like I'd been with this person for 7 years. I had committed to having children. I had committed, and that was like a bottom line. She was like, if you don't want kids, like I'm out, and I was like, for sure.
Yeah.
I had committed to having kids. I said yes. I had committed to living in different places for her military career. I had committed to being her wife. I had committed, and we were 20 days from solidifying that legally. And the only way anything could have changed, the only way I could have expanded was to honor the little inklings that came up, right? So for the how question, it's the first step is really honoring, maybe I'm not just being crazy. Maybe I should listen, right? So I opened myself up. I was like, okay, fuck, right? Like, yeah. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have to acknowledge that it's coming up. I didn't make a decision in that moment. I didn't say, oh, I have this feeling, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think that like they're going to have to make a decision overnight. I didn't. It took me six to 8 months, and then it took us 6 months to move out of the house with each other.
Wow. That's good that you gave each other that time.
Yeah. It helped with closure for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the first thing I had to do was honor that what I was feeling might be valid. So the how is, number one, honor what's going on. Yeah. Number two, get curious. I had to get curious. I had to say like, okay, society told me I had to be a mom. Is that like, can I imagine my life like that? Like, is that really what I want? How does my body react? Like I sat and thought about it a lot. I like sat and meditated and just like laid on my bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about it. I got really, really curious. Like, why is this happening now? Has this always been there? Have I always been questioning this? Has there been any like any indication that this isn't right?
Yeah.
And then I had to create a vision. Like I had to really look at, I think a lot of the times we look at where we're dissatisfied and we're like, I'm dissatisfied. I'm unhappy. But then we don't actually imagine like, well, what do I want?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the simplest questions to ask and one of the hardest questions to answer.
Right.
And so when we're looking at like, how do we actually expand? How do we actually do this? One of the most important aspects is like, we have to actually think about what we want. Because if it's not what we have, we're going to sure as shit settle for what we have if we don't know what else we want.
Yeah.
So I had to look at like, okay, imagine myself like in this life and like married and military wife and with kids. And my body just kept saying, no, 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 like that's not your life. That's her life.
And how did you know that your body was saying no? Like, was it your mind telling you? Because you just said your body. Like, what's the difference? If people are like, oh, I want to expand, I want to face my fears. Someone might also say, marrying this person is, I'm scared shitless to marry someone, but I'm facing my fears, and that's a good thing, and maybe I'll expand.
Yeah.
In your circumstance, it's like, well, you had that, you almost had a fear to marry her, but that wasn't the right thing to do to serve your happiness and your expansion. So, how do people decipher between the fear of something that's going to serve their happiness in the long run, or the fear of their intuition actually saying like, hey, this isn't right for you?
Yeah. So what I've always found is fear is really, really loud and intuition is really, really quiet.
Uh-huh.
And fear is really, really confused and intuition is really, really certain.
Okay.
Right. And so that's been my process personally, is I found like, I didn't want that to be the answer. I didn't want the answer to be leave the longest relationship you've ever been in with your fiance. Right. Like I didn't want that to be the answer, but it was quiet and it was certain. And the way that I found it, the quiet certainty, was I listened.
Yeah.
I got quiet a lot. I went on a lot of walks. I shared how I was feeling with Andrea. I told her, I was honest with her. I said, this is coming up and I'm going to have to figure this out. And, and like, she said, I love you more than I need to keep you. So whatever you choose, I support you.
Aww.
And I had to listen. And I think we have this tendency to speed up to try to find the answer.
Yeah.
But it's often in slowing down and getting really quiet, which is terrifying for the brain. The brain is like, fuck no, so hurry up, speed up, right?
Yeah. Fight or flight, go on.
Go. Right? Like this is important. I've noticed that when our brains are screaming at us like that, we're often operating from fear. And when we quiet down, our intuition often operates from silent certainty or quiet certainty. And so let's say you're afraid of marrying someone, right? You're like, I don't know if this is right,
Yeah.
If you sit and get quiet and listen, you may find out like, I know I'm doing this. This is it. Like they're the one. I know I'm doing this. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
But they're the one, right? Or like they're the one that I'm going to choose this with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you may be like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm creating a home, building a wedding. And if you get quiet, you'll notice this isn't the right thing.
Right. Interesting.
And so, or like you'll get scared and then you'll quiet down and it'll be like, you're right, go. Yep. And so I had a lot of fear come up.
Yep.
And in order to know that I was certain, because I mean, it's a really, really big decision that I had to face, right? Like,
oh yeah.
There was guilt around it. There's like, am I taking her future children from her? Like, we're already in our 30s. Am I ruining her life? Like, yeah. I should have done this years ago. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Right. Yeah. So there's all that fear that comes up. And then you notice like fear makes you want to leave, but then fear makes you want to stay, and fear can't really make up its fucking mind. Yeah. And so fear is very, very loud and very, very confused. Intuition is very, very quiet and very, very certain. And so I got quiet and I got slow and I sat and I asked for patience. Mm-hmm. And I had to have patience with myself, which was really hard. And I remember at some point I was in a meditation and I'd been asking the question and, I was still kind of confused. And at some point in a meditation, my body was just like, you're going to leave. And I just burst into tears. And Andrea was sitting next to me at the time. And I just like cried into her and like let it all go. And I think she knew like that was the moment that I realized. But I couldn't have known that if I didn't listen.
Yeah.
And so for anybody questioning, is this just my fear or is this intuition?
Yeah.
Get really quiet, slow down, because your intuition is going to be quiet and certain and persistent. and your fear is going to be erratic and confused and loud.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we feel like we can't do, right? When we're scared and we're, everything's loud and our thoughts are eating us alive. Like
Right.
we're like, how am I supposed to fucking calm down now? Like,
right. It's definitely a practice.
Exactly, especially when we feel time pressured. Like a
Oh,
lot of
for
times,
sure.
a lot of times we aren't even time pressured, but we feel like, oh, I need to make a decision right now, like, or else. It's like, learn to be really like practical and logical. And it's like, how much time do you have? Like, how much time do you actually have to make a decision on this? Does it need to be right now? And
Right.
learning to really calm down is an
Right.
important first step, but that's the hardest step as well when you're in those spaces in life.
For sure. And then, like people may wonder, well, what if your partner wasn't cool about it? What if she was like, no, right?
Exactly.
And so then the question becomes like, what do you do then, right? And I would say that my calm certainty, my quiet certainty knew that I needed time.
Yeah.
And from that place, like I knew I needed time. If she made a different choice, then it's like I get to let her make her choices too.
For sure.
And so like then it becomes a question of like, do I want to honor myself, or do I want to honor this person? And neither is right or wrong. It's just, which one am I going to choose?
Yeah, that's important as well. Like I had that as well when I broke up with my long-term partner. I knew as a fact, like we already kind of I tried leaving him, and like I already kind of knew he was all or nothing kind of person. And he's like, if you go, I never want to see you again, basically. And I still loved him and I cared about him, and that was one of the hardest decisions I had to make in my life as well. It's like, it's not up to, like, I felt like I had to show up and make the decision of something that I thought I could regret for the rest of my life. And then when finally, like years down the road, when I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to regret this, and I feel like it's the right thing to do, and I did it, then it was also like, well, I would have loved to still, be in touch with this person who I love so much, my first love, and then having to respect and honor that they're on their own journey, and that I still don't get my decision on the end. Like I got to choose if I wanted to be with him or not, but then I couldn't just decide what was going to happen after that, because
yeah.
So that is totally, I feel you. That's hard.
Yeah. And it's, it's like, if we want to be honored by ourselves and others, we also have to honor other people, right? And where they are. Like you said perfectly, like you had to honor that space, and then we have to honor their decisions and how they want to show up, because in relationships, especially, there's two decision makers, right? Like there's two completely different worlds trying to collide and build something. And we all process things differently, and we all show up differently, and we all, manage things differently. And so, that's also hard work, honoring somebody's decision, especially if it's like not in alignment with yours, so for sure. Yeah.
Especially when you think that you know better than them.
Right. Yeah. We've definitely all been there. Yeah.
It took a long time for me. I was like, you don't know.
Yeah.
I know what's better for you, but
for sure.
Yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to touch on that we haven't discussed, or that I haven't asked you today on just anything expansion that kind of like rolled onto different topics, but that's totally fine.
Yeah, that's perfect. No, I mean, we could probably talk for hours and hours, but obviously, we want to respect your listeners' time, and I want to respect your time. But I think it's just really important for people listening to recognize that they do have power, and
exactly
that they're
huge. Yeah.
The biggest thing that they're afraid of. I think that this is a really important belief to uphold in it for all of us, is whatever happens, we can handle it, right? Because I think a lot of people give their power away to something because a belief underlying it is I can't handle if that happens, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't handle if people make fun of me on the internet. I can't handle if my ex is mad at me.
Yeah.
And so number one, remember you have power. And number two, whatever happens as a result of you taking that power back, you can handle it.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing for all of us to instill in ourselves is we can handle it. I can handle it. I can handle this.
Yeah.
You know?
And it might be painful in the short term, but it'll be more beneficial for you in the long term.
Right. It'll definitely be painful. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to stay optimistic. It's so
right.
hard.
Yeah. It'll definitely be painful. And like, that's where we build resilience, you know, like we build a stronger physical body by pushing ourselves past our limits. We build a stronger spiritual body by pushing ourselves past our limits as well.
Yeah.
You know, and so you can handle it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Such a good message to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alexandra.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks. Bye.